A Texas school district is pulling the Bible from its library shelves. It's among some 40 titles now under review in the Keller Independent School District in Texas, along with Anne Frank's diary and illustrated version. Some of the books sparked controversy last year after parent complaints. The district says this is just a temporary move, saying this: right now, Keller ISD's administration is asking our campus staff and librarians to review books that were challenged last year to determine if they meet the requirements of the new policy. Books will be returned to the libraries as soon as it is confirmed that they comply with the new policy. So, Lisa, the school district apparently got accused of having books with sexual content, so they put under review all of these books. There were 3 parent complaints about the Bible, one was withdrawn, citing sexual content and violence. My question is, were these people, these anonymous individuals, asleep when they learned that kindergarten through second graders were being taught across the country sexually explicit content like body parts in vivid detail? You don't believe me? Google what they teach in New York City private schools.
Well, and one of the books that was actually, permanently banned, I believe, was Gender Queer,
Yes.
which is a book that was at issue in Loudoun County, and it's geared towards adolescents. And there's actual pictures of young people doing sexual acts on one another for children. I mean, I think you would hope most Americans would say, wait a minute, we don't need this for young kids in the country. And of course, all this originated with COVID and parents being more awake and being home and seeing what their kids were being taught and worried about things like, critical race theory being indoctrinated on kids, worried about things like this. We saw the big fight in Loudoun County, which led to Governor Youngkin winning over McAuliffe. And the major issue was sort of a parents-led rebellion of being like, no, we're in charge of our kids' education and what our kids are being taught, not you, the government.
So to your point, the book Gender Queer, the Washington Post, hardly a conservative publication, as you know.
Yes.
This is how they describe one of the scenes in that book that was also targeted. A sexual fantasy of the authors is depicted in which an apparently teenage youth is about to engage in a sexual act with an older bearded man. A reason to take that out of. Right, right. But you contrast that, Emily, with the Bible, the most read book in all of human history. In fact, over the last 50 years, nearly 4 billion copies have been sold. Compare that to Harry Potter, which is number 3 at 400 million. Not only that, foundation of the world's largest religion, a classic historical text. If you don't believe it in the religious context, at least we can be appreciated in that context. But that's the one we're removing.
I think that what's so difficult to digest here is that the whim of a few has such an impact on the many. And this was one of the reviewers, actually, her point was about that Anne Frank graphic novel, which is like the illustrated version, where she said, we approved this. And we thought to ourselves, like, yes, we saved this. This is literature that this school should be exposed to the students here. And yet, because someone else said, no, we're going to review it again, all of a sudden it's back under review. We already addressed this. The fact that because one person or 3 people put the Bible on that is absolutely horrifying. This is when the school administrators need to step up and say, absolutely not. You know what? We don't need a committee right now to discuss this for 40 minutes. It's going back on the shelf. Because the default here as well is that if someone subjected it to review, that it's automatically taken off the shelf while they decide. But every day without the Bible is a day lost, and that Bible should be back on the shelves.
Agreed. And Harris, there's a difference. Look, I think a new book that's written that has sexual content inappropriate for children, yes, I think that is a book that should be taken away, even though I'm in general not for canceling books out of library shelves. But a book like Anne Frank, I've not seen the illustrated version. This is a real depiction of something that happened in human history. Students need to see and understand the Holocaust, slavery, human atrocities in the world's history.
So back to Emily's point for just a second in terms of, once something is kind of settled and then it gets pulled off the shelves while they review it and so on and so forth. What is the end game here? Is it to let the few win? Is it to appease the few to show that, look, we took a triple, quadruple look? Is there really a policy that is a benchmark that everybody agrees on? Were parents part of that conversation? This just opens, to me, up the room for even more questions. And I don't know if there's enough transparency in this process yet. Maybe they haven't felt like they needed it, but they need it now, for them to explain the differences and commonalities between the Bible and the book with the sexual pictures. Like why one seems like an automatic no for kindergarten through 3rd grade, and the other one is, can we discuss this? Because taking the Bible out of schools then furthers the political goal that we know already exists, as they want to, on one side of the political aisle, remove things like, the Pledge of Allegiance and things that have the word God and so on and so forth. So to avoid any pale any painting of politics in this. Sounds like to me they need to have an open discussion. And why remove it while you're talking about it?
Yeah.
Why can't you leave it up? Because you can't replace the learning, whatever the book is.
Yeah.
You can't replace what was gone, except for the sex pictures, because those are not things that kindergartens through third graders are going to be practicing.
Yep.
But historic books, you can't replace that learning while it's, on a back shelf while 5 people decide whether or not Betty was right.
Exactly. You got to learn your history,
Betty was
Jimmy.
wrong.
And
Thank you.
also, part of recent history is the election of Glenn Youngkin, who on this very issue of education
Well, there's a
won.
huge liability for Democrats, but to address this from a parental standpoint, the bigger frustration when it comes to censoring books like this is it does nothing to actually help our kids catch up in the world from the sense of American children right now, okay, aren't in the top 35 in math or science in the world. The average school kid right now thinks 2 + 2 = Jell-O, okay? Banning the Bible is not going to... I mean, you're like, what do you mean? Public schools, me too. But banning the Bible doesn't help that. And the only thing I would add, because we're always fighting the wrong battles. All of these woke grievances, they're cultural arsonists. They set fires themselves and then show up to the scene to extinguish them so they can claim whatever currency or virtue comes with doing so. But the kids are the liability because the kids don't get their education furthered, okay? Staggering numbers on the Bible, by the way, 4 billion copies.
4 billion.
Very impressive, considering Jesus isn't very big on social media. He only has 12 followers. I mean, good night, everybody. Sorry.
Well, and
my
he
Bible
has 12
material.
followers. Not all of them had his back.
How about that?
He still got betrayed.
There, boom, you're right.
Lord help the rest of us.
I like cultural arsonists,
All right, we are awaiting the start of that